I signed the lottery ticket with shaking hands, then locked it in a drawer and told no one. Not my parents. Not my siblings. I was suddenly worth 120 million, and terrified of what the truth might destroy before it ever built anything. Winning 120 million should feel like freedom. But for me, it felt like a test of trust, patience, and identity. This is the story of why I hid my biggest secret from the people I love most. How silence changed me, and the moment a luxury house forced the truth into the open. I almost didn't check the numbers. The ticket sat folded in my wallet for hours, rubbing against the worn leather, like it was just another receipt I'd forget to throw away. I remember telling myself I'd check it later, after dinner, after sleep, after anything that felt less dangerous than hope. Because hope has a way of disappointing you, and I'd trained myself not to expect miracles. But eventually, curiosity won. I pulled the ticket out, smoothed the creases with my thumb, and opened the lottery app with a kind of casual disbelief, already preparing the familiar feeling of almost. The first number matched. I frowned. That happens sometimes. The second number matched too, and my chest tightened just a little. By the third, my heart started beating louder than the room around me. I actually laughed under my breath, shaking my head like the universe was playing a joke on me. My fingers hovered over the screen as I checked again, slower this time, reading each digit carefully, comparing, recomparing. Fourth number, matched. Fifth matched. By the sixth, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. My mouth went dry, and for a moment, I genuinely thought I might pass out. I remember staring at the screen, waiting for something to change, for a correction, an error message, anything that would bring me back to reality. But nothing did. The numbers stayed the same. The words I knew: money doesn't just buy things. It buys expectations, pressure, and resentment, and that realization hit me almost immediately after the win. In movies, wealth looks like instant freedom, but in real life, it can quietly turn relationships into negotiations. I had seen it happen to distant relatives and old friends who came into sudden money. Conversations changed. Gratitude slowly transformed into entitlement. Love became conditional, tied to what could be given instead of what already existed. I didn't want that future for my family, and I didn't want to become someone they saw as an endless solution to every problem. Protecting my family wasn't about keeping them in the dark forever. It was about buying time. Time to understand what this kind of money really meant. I knew that once the truth was out, nothing could be undone. Every financial struggle they faced would suddenly feel unnecessary. Every no I ever said would be questioned. I wanted to make sure that when I finally spoke, I could set boundaries without sounding selfish, and offer help without creating dependence. Silence, for a while, felt like the safest option. At the same time, I was protecting myself. I wasn't ready to carry the emotional weight of being everyone's answer. I needed space to process the shock, the fear, and the responsibility that came with a nine-figure bank balance. People assume money gives you confidence, but at first, it does the opposite. It magnifies your insecurities. I worried about making the wrong decision, trusting the wrong person, or letting guilt guide choices that should be guided by wisdom. Keeping this secret gave me room to grow into the role that money forced on me. There was also the fear of being seen differently. I didn't want admiration that wasn't earned or respect that came with a price tag. I wanted my parents' pride to stay rooted in who I was, not what I had. I wanted my siblings to talk to me the same way, argue with me the same way, laugh with me without hesitation. Money has a way of building invisible walls, and I wasn't ready to live behind one. Every day I stayed quiet was a balancing act between love and fear. I smiled through conversations about bills and future plans, knowing I could fix everything with a sentence, but also knowing that sentence would change the tone of every conversation after. In that silence, I learned something important: protecting people You love sometimes means delaying the truth, not to deceive them, but to prepare yourself to reveal it with clarity, strength, and intention. By day, nothing about me seemed different. I woke up at the same time, wore the same clothes, answered the same messages, and laughed at the same jokes. I sat at family dinners and talked about ordinary problems: bills, work stress, plans for the weekend, while carrying a secret that could rewrite every conversation in the room. I became an expert at acting normal, because normal was the safest disguise I had. The more ordinary I appeared, the less anyone questioned me. But when night came, everything changed. The house would go quiet, lights dimmed, and I'd sit alone with my laptop glowing in the dark. That's when the real work began. I wasn't scrolling for entertainment anymore. I was studying survival. I learned quickly that sudden wealth without knowledge is just another kind of trap. So I started researching lawyers who specialized in asset protection, people who understood how to shield wealth from lawsuits, bad decisions, and even well-meaning relatives. Every article felt like a warning one wrong move could cost millions. Then came financial advisors. I didn't want someone flashy or greedy. I wanted discipline, patience, and long-term thinking. I read forums, watched interviews, and compared philosophies. Some talked about growth at all costs. Others spoke about preservation, legacy, and responsibility. Those words stuck with me. I realized this money wasn't just mine. It was something I was temporarily responsible for. How I handled it would echo for decades. Security was the part that scared me the most. I never imagined I'd need to think about personal safety beyond locking a door. Suddenly, I was learning about privacy, digital footprints, home surveillance, and how quickly information spreads. I deleted old posts, tightened settings, and stopped sharing my location. The world felt bigger, but also more dangerous. Wealth doesn't just attract opportunity. It attracts attention, and not all of it is good. The hardest part wasn't the research. It was the loneliness. Every decision rested on my shoulders. I couldn't ask my parents for advice. I couldn't joke with friends about my fears. I carried the weight in silence, pretending everything was fine while my mind raced every night. There were moments I wanted to tell someone, anyone, just to breathe easier. But silence felt safer than chaos. That silence became my shield. It protected me from rushed decisions, from emotional reactions, from people who might love me, but not understand the magnitude of what had happened. It gave me time to grow into the person this new reality required. Slowly, I stopped seeing the money as a miracle and started seeing it as a responsibility. And in those quiet nights, alone with my thoughts and research tabs, I wasn't just building a plan. I was building the discipline and clarity that would eventually allow me to step into the truth without losing myself. That fear stayed with me longer than the excitement ever did. I kept replaying the same question in my head late at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of a life that no longer felt simple. I worried that once money entered the room, honesty would quietly slip out the back door. I had seen it happen to other people. Relationships bending, conversations changing, laughter sounding just a little less real. I didn't want to become a walking wallet or a solution to everyone's problems. I wanted to remain a son, a sibling, a human being who was valued for more than what I could give. Before the money, love felt uncomplicated. Family gatherings were about stories, jokes, shared struggles, and small victories. After the win, even though no one knew yet, I imagined those same moments turning transactional. A casual conversation could become a request. A shared dream could become an expectation. I feared that honesty would be replaced by politeness, and sincerity by calculation. Would people still tell me the truth if they thought I could change their lives with a check? Or would they tell me what they thought I wanted to hear, just to stay close? The scariest part wasn't losing the money. It was losing clarity. I didn't want to constantly question people's motives or second-guess every smile. I didn't want to wonder if appreciation was genuine or just gratitude wrapped in obligation. The idea that love might come with conditions terrified me. Because conditional love isn't love at all. It's a contract, and contracts can be broken the moment the terms change. I also feared what the money might do to me. Would I start measuring my worth by how much I could provide? Would I feel guilty saying no, even when saying yes would hurt me or enable unhealthy patterns? I didn't want power to quietly reshape my identity. I wanted to remain grounded, to remember who I was before the numbers got bigger and the stakes got higher. But I knew money has a way of amplifying insecurities you didn't even know you had. So I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't trust my family, but because I wanted to protect the purity of our relationships for as long as I could. I wanted to give myself time to build emotional boundaries before financial ones were even needed. I needed to be strong enough to hear disappointment without feeling responsible for fixing everything. I needed to be confident enough to believe that love could survive the truth. In the end, I learned that this fear wasn't about money at all. It was about identity, trust, and belonging. I wanted to be loved for my presence, not my potential. For my heart, not my resources. And that fear, as heavy as it was, taught me something powerful. Real love doesn't disappear when money enters the room. It reveals itself. I took months to learn how wealth works, because I realized very quickly that money without understanding is dangerous. At first, I thought the hardest part would be winning the lottery, but I was wrong. The real challenge began after. I slowed everything down on purpose. No splurging, no announcements, no sudden lifestyle changes. Instead, I spent long nights reading about how money actually moves, how it grows, how it disappears, and how easily it can ruin people who rush into it unprepared. I learned that investments aren't about chasing quick wins. They're about patience, balance, and discipline. I sat with advisors who didn't flatter me or promise miracles. I asked uncomfortable questions about risk, diversification, and long-term planning. I listened more than I spoke. For the first time, I understood that real wealth is built by protecting what you have just as much as growing it. Every decision had consequences. Not just for me, but for my future and my family. Taxes were another wake-up call. I used to think taxes were simple until millions were involved. I learned how easily poor planning could erase a massive portion of what I'd won. I studied structures, compliance, and legal responsibilities. Not to avoid paying what I owed, but to be smart, transparent, and ethical. I wanted to sleep at night knowing my wealth wasn't built on shortcuts or fear. Responsibility hit me the hardest. This money wasn't just freedom. It was weight. I realized every purchase sent a message, every choice set a precedent. If I acted recklessly, I'd teach the people around me that money is something to burn. If I acted thoughtfully, I could show that money is something to respect. I didn't want to become someone unrecognizable, disconnected from the values that shaped me before the win. There were moments of temptation. Moments when I wanted to say, I deserve this, and spend without thinking. But I reminded myself that wealth should expand your life, not shrink your character. I created rules for myself, cooling off periods before big purchases, clear boundaries between needs and wants, and a long-term vision that extended beyond my own comfort. Most importantly, I defined what the money was for. Not just luxury, but security. Not just enjoyment, but impact. I thought about education, stability, and giving back in ways that felt meaningful, not performative. I wanted the money to reflect who I was, not rewrite me into someone else. By the end of those months, something shifted. I stopped seeing the money as a miracle and started seeing it as a responsibility. A powerful one. And in making that promise, to let the money serve my values instead of erasing them, I didn't just protect my wealth. I protected myself. Every family dinner felt heavier in a way I couldn't explain without giving everything away. The table was the same. The food smelled the same. and the conversations followed their usual rhythm. But I wasn't the same person sitting in that chair anymore. I laughed at the jokes a second too late, smiled a little too carefully, and nodded through conversations while my mind carried a secret worth 120 million. It wasn't excitement that filled my chest in those moments. It was pressure, thick and constant, like I was holding my breath for hours at a time. When my parents talked about bills, future plans, or small financial worries, I felt a sharp knot twist inside me. Every instinct screamed to fix everything instantly, to reach into my pocket and erase their stress with a single sentence. But I stayed quiet. I reminded myself that once I spoke those words, nothing would ever be the same again. Their advice, their expectations, even their tone toward me would shift. I didn't want to be treated like an answer to problems I hadn't created. The hardest part was pretending to be worried about the same things. When someone complained about rising prices or job insecurity, I nodded in agreement, even though my reality had completely changed. I felt guilty for listening without reacting, like I was lying just by being present. Yet I also feared that telling the truth too soon would rob me of something precious. The chance to still be seen as normal, as their son or sibling, not as a walking solution. There were moments when the weight nearly broke me. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom just to breathe, staring at my reflection and reminding myself to act natural. Don't say too much. Don't say too little. Don't offer help. Don't pull away. The balance was exhausting. I started to realize that money doesn't only change what you can buy, it changes how carefully you have to move through your own life. At the same time, those dinners taught me something powerful. They showed me what really mattered before wealth entered the room. The laughter wasn't about money. The arguments weren't about money. The love wasn't conditional on money. That realization grounded me. It reminded me why I was being patient in the first place, not to hide forever, but to protect the relationships that made life meaningful long before I ever became rich. By the end of each dinner, I felt drained, but also strangely motivated. Carrying that secret forced me to grow emotionally faster than I ever had. I learned restraint, empathy, and discipline. I learned that timing matters, and that sometimes silence isn't cowardice. It's preparation. Sitting there, smiling through the wait, I promised myself that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't shatter the table we shared. It would strengthen it. When I bought the house, gates, glass, ocean views, there was no hiding anymore. Questions came fast. Answers had to come faster. The moment the paperwork was finalized, reality hit me harder than winning the lottery ever had. This wasn't a quiet upgrade or a subtle change in lifestyle. This was a statement. A house like that doesn't whisper wealth. It announces it, and once it did, the silence I had carefully maintained for so long began to collapse. At first, it was small comments. My parents asked casually how I managed to find such a place. My siblings joked about whether I'd secretly become a billionaire overnight. Friends suddenly wanted to visit more often. Everyone smiled, but behind every smile was curiosity, and behind every question was something heavier: suspicion. I realized then that money doesn't just change what you own, it changes how closely people watch you. Every time I drove through those gates, I felt two emotions at once: pride and panic. Pride because I had built something secure, beautiful, and lasting. Panic because I knew the truth was now standing in plain sight. You can hide numbers in a bank account, but you can't hide a home that reflects sunlight off glass walls overlooking the ocean. The house became a mirror, forcing me to look at the cost of my secrecy. Family visits became harder. Conversations lingered a little too long on finances. Someone would pause mid-sentence, glance around the living room, and then continue like nothing happened. But everything had happened. I could feel the distance growing, not because they knew the truth, but because they didn't. I wasn't protecting them anymore. I was pushing them away. Late one night, Standing alone in the massive living room, I realized how quiet wealth can be when it's not shared honestly. The house echoed, not with luxury, but with unanswered questions. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just bought a home, I had bought a deadline. The truth was no longer optional. It was overdue. The next family gathering confirmed it. The questions were no longer jokes. They were direct. How did I afford this? Why didn't I say anything? What else was I hiding? I saw concern, confusion, and even a hint of hurt in their eyes. That was the moment I understood something crucial. Secrets don't protect relationships, they test them. Taking a deep breath, I finally told them everything. Not with excitement or pride, but with honesty. I explained the fear, the pressure, and the reason I waited. The room went silent, not because they were angry, but because they were processing a reality none of us had prepared for. And in that silence, something shifted. The weight I had been carrying alone finally lifted. The house didn't divide us the way I feared. Instead, it became the place where the truth came out, where trust was rebuilt, and where I learned that real security doesn't come from walls, gates, or ocean views. It comes from facing the moment you can no longer hide, and choosing honesty anyway. Shock hit first. Their faces froze, like time itself had stalled in the room. No one spoke. My parents just stared at me, trying to connect the person they'd known all their lives with the words they'd just heard. My siblings looked at each other, searching for clues, wondering if this was some kind of joke that had gone on too long. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable, and terrifying. In that moment, I questioned everything, whether hiding the truth had been a mistake, whether saying it out loud would fracture us beyond repair. Then came the tears. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet ones that slip out when emotions collide all at once. My mother's eyes filled first. She didn't cry because of the money. She cried because she realized how long I'd been carrying something this big alone. My father looked away, not in anger, but in disbelief, rubbing his hands together like he was grounding himself in reality. The room felt fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter years of love and trust. I started explaining why I hid it, how afraid I was, how I didn't want money to change the way they looked at me or each other. My voice shook as I admitted I was scared of becoming a stranger in my own family. I expected questions about numbers, about houses, about what they would get. Instead, the first thing my father asked was, "Were you okay?" That single question cracked something open inside me. For the first time since winning, I felt seen not as a jackpot but as a person. The silence slowly transformed. It wasn't tense anymore, it was thoughtful. My siblings began asking what it had been like. What nights alone with that secret felt like. How heavy the responsibility must have been. Their curiosity wasn't greedy, it was human. They wanted to understand my experience, not claim a piece of it. That's when relief arrived. Soft but undeniable. The fear I'd been carrying for months started to loosen its grip. We talked for hours. About boundaries. About how money can complicate love, if it's allowed to lead instead of follow. About how we wanted to stay grounded, honest, and connected no matter how different life might look going forward. There were disagreements, awkward pauses, and emotional moments, but none of it felt destructive. It felt necessary. Healing doesn't come from pretending nothing has changed. It comes from facing change together. At some point, laughter returned. Nervous at first, then real. Stories were shared, old memories resurfaced, and for the first time, the money felt small compared to the room we were building between us. The truth didn't create distance, it created depth. It allowed conversations we'd never had before, about trust, responsibility, and what really matters when everything else is stripped away. That night ended not with answers to every question, but with something far more valuable. Understanding. The door that opened wasn't made of luxury or wealth. It was made of honesty. And walking through it together reminded me that while money can buy comfort, it's truth that gives peace. We talked for hours, longer than any conversation we'd had in years. Not about numbers or cars or vacations, but about boundaries. Clear, honest lines that would protect our relationships from slowly breaking under the weight of money. We agreed that wealth wouldn't give anyone control over anyone else, and that love would never be measured by financial support. Saying those things out loud felt like releasing a pressure I didn't even realize we were all holding. For the first time since the win, the money felt smaller, and our connection felt bigger. Purpose came next, and that conversation changed everything. We asked hard questions. What do we actually want this money to do? What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? We realized that without intention, wealth drifts. It doesn't automatically create happiness or meaning. It magnifies direction, whether that direction is healthy or destructive. Together, we decided the money would never replace effort, values, or personal responsibility. It wouldn't be used to escape life, but to build a better one. Helping others became the most emotional part of the discussion. Each person shared causes close to true wealth. Isn't the number in your account. It's clarity, courage, and connection. Money amplifies who you already are. So choose wisely who you become. I learned this the hard way. Not when I won the lottery, but when I tried to understand what it meant. At first, I thought the money would solve everything. Every worry, every limitation, every unanswered question about my future. But instead of answers, it gave me a mirror. It reflected my fears, my values, and my priorities more clearly than ever before. Clarity came first. With nothing financially holding me back, I had to confront who I really was and what I actually wanted. Without excuses, there was no hiding from indecision. I realized that money doesn't create purpose, it demands it. If you don't decide what matters to you, wealth will decide for you, pulling you in 100 directions at once. Clarity meant choosing intention over impulse, long-term meaning over short-term pleasure, and values over vanity. Then came courage. Courage to say no when people expected yes. Courage to set boundaries when generosity turned into entitlement. Courage to admit that not everyone cheering for you is rooting for you. Wealth tests your backbone. It challenges you to stand firm in your principles, even when it would be easier to buy silence, approval, or peace. Real courage isn't about spending freely. It's about spending wisely, living honestly, and accepting that disappointment is sometimes the price of self-respect. But the most powerful lesson was connection. Money can build walls just as easily as it builds bridges. I saw how quickly relationships could change when wealth entered the conversation. Some people leaned in with love, others with expectation, and a few with quiet distance. That's when I understood that connection isn't about access to resources. It's about trust, presence, and shared values. The strongest relationships in my life weren't strengthened by money, but by honesty and consistency. Wealth didn't create those bonds. It revealed which ones were real. Money amplifies who you already are. If you're insecure, it magnifies fear. If you're generous, it expands impact. If you're lost, it deepens confusion. That truth is uncomfortable, but it's also empowering. It means wealth isn't the problem or the solution. It's the spotlight. The real work happens long before the money shows up. In the habits you build, the integrity you practice, and the way you treat people when there's nothing to gain. In the end, I realized that true wealth is waking up without fear of losing yourself. It's having the courage to live aligned with your values, and the clarity to know what those values are. It's being able to sit with the people you love, not as a provider or a savior, but as yourself. Money can buy comfort, freedom, and opportunity, but only clarity, courage, and connection can give you peace. Winning the lottery didn't make me rich. Telling the truth did. If you ever face a moment that could change everything, remember this. Handle success with humility, protect your values, and never forget that the greatest luxury is trust.